Hello, and welcome to my channel. I'm your host, That Creepy Reading, and today I want to present 5 creepypastas that are the best of what I could find for the month. Now, today, at least specifically today this is uploaded on, is a very special day indeed. Not only is this the first day where I narrated my first creepypasta, not on this channel mind you, but it also happens to be my birthday. For those of you who come here for the true Let's Not Meet stories, why don't you just sit back, relax, and enjoy one of the good old classically written, not strictly true, horror stories of the internet age. And for those of you who enjoy creepypastas and are coming here to watch me narrate, if you could do me such a favor as to not call me White Mudahar, it would mean the world to me. Today is my birthday. I'm probably gonna be off having drinks and enjoying a nice afternoon out. But for the rest of you, sit back, relax, turn down the lights, and welcome to my dungeon. I like to present 5 of the best creepypastas of this month.
I'm Blue. You may know the band Eiffel 65 for their hits Move Your Body or Too Much Heaven. They're an Italian Eurodance group, and they have maybe 3 hits in America? The 2 previously mentioned songs and I'm Blue. If you heard the song, you'd recognize its catchy beat and mostly gibberish lyrics. The song came out in America in 1999, so if you're older than 15 you may have heard it. Chances are though that you haven't heard the story behind the song. In their recent biography, Eiffel 65 reveals the truth. Originally there were 4 members in Eiffel 65. Jeffrey J., Raimundo Sanguine, Maurizio Lobina, and Gabry Ponte. After a few unsuccessful one-hit blunders, the 4 of them decided to seek inspiration serving as missionaries with their church. Soon they were off to the heart of Africa to build irrigation systems for landlocked villages. None of them really wanted the physical labor, but the word of God had brought them down there, and there they would work. Construction was rather boring, despite being short-staffed. The watering systems came with enough instructions that the pipes fit together within a few weeks, saving the local farms and winning over the hearts of the villagers. Out of all the volunteers, the 4 bandmates were selected by the villagers to celebrate that night. A grand feast was to be prepared for them. Sick of the MRE shipped to them from some rusty American warehouse, they accepted. That night, Jeffrey, Raimundo, Maurizio, and Gabry entered the village and were greeted by a long table at the edge of a large circle, with a massive bonfire in the center. The 4 sat down, and immediately one of the villagers emerged from a nearby hut, carrying a goat, bringing it to the bonfire. The 4 had lived in the area long enough that what came next didn't shock them, but Raimundo was still squeamish. The villager skewed the goat on a stick and roasted it over the bonfire, letting the animal's hair burn away as the flesh boiled off. After what seemed like an eternity, the chef removed the carcass from the fire and began hacking away at it. Every so often he would cut an artery and hot blood would spurt out to the dirt, sizzling as it continued to boil. The 4 choice cuts went to the band, and the chef continued to serve the goat to the rest of the gathered villagers. The band, more hungry than disgusted, began digging into the freshly roasted goat, but Raimundo was still disturbed by the goat's fate, and only managed to swallow 3 bites before his bandmates had finished their portions. Not wanting to offend his generous hosts, Raimundo split his portions among his 3 bandmates, and they quickly finished the leftovers. The villagers, having finished their main courses as well, began dancing in a circle around the bonfire. The villagers' shadows danced as much as they did, in time with the flickering of the flames. The sun had set by this point, leaving the flame as the last source of light for miles. As the dance continued, one of the villagers not entranced by the flame emerged from her hut, carrying a second course for the band. In the dim light, it looked like a wonderful pile of pulled pork, which the band was eager to consume. However, having eaten most of Raimundo's portion of the goat, the 3 band members were already stuffed, and so offered the lion's share of the meat to Rai. He heartily gulped down the familiar food, and was soon satisfied. His satisfaction was not to last. Soon Rai rose from the table and joined the villagers in their dance. What had once been an unfollowable flurry of hands and feet became child's play as he matched the motions of his neighbors flawlessly. Entranced by the dance, Rai began chanting, "I'm blue, dabba dee dabba die, dabba dee dabba die, dabba dee dabba die." Rai's bandmates knew that this was the inspiration they had been looking for, So they wrote down Rai's bursts of musical inspiration and continued to watch him dance. His motions quickened, much faster than the rest of the circle, until Rai dropped his hands and stood motionless, continuing the chant. The circle closed around him, and the band lost sight of Rai for a moment, until they saw him run forward and leap face first into the fire, still chanting. The three of them tried to break through the circle to save their friend, but every step they tried to get through was blocked by a well-placed dance step. All they could do is watch as their friend burned on the pyre, chanting his haunting refrain until his lungs were no more. The band ran, far off into the darkness, until they came across the volunteer camp they had been staying at. They didn't speak a word of what had happened to any of the volunteers, and when dawn broke, the band left for the airport to return to Italy. The three of them managed to compensate for Raimundo's musical talent, and produced the album Europop. Most of the songs were lackluster, but Blue made it to American shores and was an instant hit. The band made millions off the album, but not without a cost. The band, as a tribute, had used Raimundo's final chant as most of the lyrics in Blue. The murder rate doubled in Italy that year, with most of the victims never being found, at least not in their entirety. Of the victims that were located, most were incomplete torsos, with most of their flesh eaten off, as if by savage animals. No forensic tests were able to identify what sort of animal consumed these people, nor were they able to find the rest of the victims. It wasn't until years later that a researcher made a connection between Blue's release and the mystery deaths. By reversing the lyrics, the researcher discovered Raimundo's secret message. Hide the body, eat the body, hide the body, eat the body. Hear it for yourself.
Autopilot by Scar Joe. Have you ever forgotten your phone? When did you realize you'd forgotten it? I'm guessing you didn't just smack your forehead and exclaim, "Damn!" apropos to nothing. The realization probably didn't dawn on you spontaneously. More likely, you reached for your phone, pawing it open from your pocket or handbag, and were momentarily confused by it not being there. Then I can imagine you doing a mental recap of the morning's events. Shit. In my case, my phone's alarm woke me up as normal, but I realized that the battery was lower than I expected. It was a new phone, and it had this annoying habit of leaving applications running that drained the battery overnight. So I put it on the wall to charge while I showered instead of into my bag like normal. It was a momentary slip of the routine, but that's all it took. Once in the shower, my brain got back into the routine. It follows every morning, and that was it. Forgotten. This wasn't me being clumsy, as I later researched. This is a recognized brain function. Your brain doesn't just work on one level. It works on many. Like when you're walking somewhere, you think about your destination, avoiding hazards, but you don't need to think about keeping your legs moving properly. If you did, the entire world would turn into one massive hilarious attempt at quap cosplay. I wasn't thinking about regulating my breathing either. I was thinking about whether or not I should grab my coffee on to drive to work. I did. I wasn't thinking about moving my breakfast through my intestines. I was wondering whether I'd finish on time and be able to pick up my daughter, Emily, from the nursery after work, or get stuck in another late fee. This is the thing. There's a level of your brain that just deals with the routine, so that the rest of the brain can think about other things. Think about it. Think about your last commute. What you actually remember. Probably little, if anything. Most common journeys blur into just one, and recalling any one in particular is scientifically proven to be rather difficult. Do something often enough, and it becomes routine. Keep doing it, and it just stops being processed by the thinking bit of the brain, and gets regulated to the part of the brain that decides to deal with the routine. Your brain keeps doing it without you thinking about it. Soon enough, you think about your routine to work as much as you, keep your legs moving you to walk. Most people, like myself, call this autopilot. There is a danger there, though. If you have to break in your routine, Your ability to remember and account for the break is only as good as your ability to stop your brain from going into routine mode. My ability to remember my phone being on the counter is only as reliable as my ability to stop my brain from entering morning routine mode, which would dictate that my phone would actually be in my bag. But I didn't stop my brain from entering routine mode. I got in the shower as normal routine started, exception forgotten. Autopilot engaged. My brain was back into routine. I showered, I shaved, the radio forecasted some amazing weather, I gave Emily her breakfast, and I loaded her into the car. She was so adorable that morning. She complained about the bad sun in the morning blinding her, saying that it had stopped her from having a little sleep on the way to the nursery, and left. That was a routine. It didn't matter that my phone was on the counter charging silently. My brain was in routine, and in routine, the phone was in my bag. This is why I forgot my phone. No clumsiness. No negligence. Nothing more than my brain entering routine mode and overriding the exception. Autopilot engaged. I left for work. It's sweltering hot already. The bad sun had been burning since before the treacherously absent phone awoke me. The steering wheel was burning hot to the touch when I sat down. I think I heard Emily shift over behind the driver's seat to get out of the glare. But I got to work, submitted a report, attended the morning meeting. It's not until I took a quick coffee break and tried to reach for my phone that the illusion had been shattered. I did a mental re-step. I remembered the dying battery. I remembered putting it on the charge. I remembered leaving it there. My phone was on the counter. Autopilot disengaged. Again, there lies the danger. Until you have that moment where you reach for your phone and shatter the illusion that's still taking part in the brain's routine mode, it has no reason to question the facts of the routine. That's why it's a routine, the act of repetition. It's not as if anyone could say, "Why didn't you remember your phone? Didn't it occur to you? How could you forget? You must be negligent." This is to miss the point. My brain was telling me that the routine was completed as normal, despite the fact that it wasn't. It wasn't. I forgot my phone. According to my brain, according to the routine, my phone was in the bag. Why wouldn't I think to question that? Why wouldn't I check that? Why wouldn't I suddenly remember out of nowhere that my phone was on the counter? My brain is wired into this routine, and the routine was that of my phone in the bag. The day continued to bake. The morning haze gave way to relentless fever heat of the afternoon. Tarmac bubbled, the direct beams of heat threatened to crack the pavement. People swapped coffees for iced smoothies, and jackets discarded while sleeves were rolled up, ties loosened, brows mopped. The park slowly filled with sunbathers and barbecues. The window's frames threatened to warp. The thermometer continued to swell. Thank fuck the offices were air conditioned. But, as ever, the furnace of the day gave way to the cooler evening. Another day, another dollar. Still cursing myself for forgetting my phone. I drove home. The day's heat baked inside of the car, releasing a horrible smell from somewhere. When I arrived on the driveway, the stones were crunching uncomfortably near my tires, as my wife greeted me at the door. "Where's Emily?" Fuck. As if the phone wasn't bad enough after everything. I'd left Emily at the fucking nursery after all. I immediately sped back up to the nursery, got to the door, and started practicing my excuses, wondering vainly if I could charm my way out of a late fee. I saw a piece of paper stuck to the door. "Due to vandalism overnight, please use the side door. Today only." Overnight? What? The door was fine this morning. I froze, my knees shook. Vandals. This was a change in the routine. My phone was on the counter. I hadn't been there this morning. My phone was on the counter. I'd driven past because drinking my coffee. I not drop off Emily. My phone was on the counter. She'd moved her seat. I hadn't seen her in the mirror. My phone was on the counter. She'd fallen asleep out of the bad sun. She didn't speak when I drove past her nursery. My phone was on the counter. She changed the routine. My phone was on the counter. She changed her routine and I'd forgotten to drop her off. My phone's on the counter. 9 hours. That car, baking sun, no air, no water, no power, no help. The heat, the steering wheel was too hot to touch. That smell. I walked to the car door, numb, shock. I opened the door. My phone was on the counter, and my daughter was dead. Autopilot disengaged. The Knocking Game by Monk's Hood Collective. I have a friend at MHC who is willing to clean this up and pass it along. I'm not sure if this is really the right place for this kind of story. There are no ghosts or anything like that. I just wanted to share a creepy prank someone played on me and my friends. Back when I was in high school, we used to play something called the Knocking Game. We'd go out of the abandoned McAllister house after dark, shut ourselves inside, and turn out the lights and wait. Eventually, there'd be a knock on the door. The knocking would get louder and louder and louder until somebody finally checked it out and turned on a flashlight. The knocking always stopped the moment the lights went off again. Playing the Knocking Game was like fooling around with an Ouija board. If no one's breaking the rules, you're not gonna have a good time. There was an open secret amongst our friends that whenever the Knocking Game actually worked, someone had recruited one of their buddies to wait outside and knock as the flashlights were turned off. The locked doors gave them just enough time to hide, if one of the people inside tried to catch them in the act, that is. So, that's why none of us were surprised when Josh didn't show up. He was the one who suggested we play in the first place. We suspected that he was gonna wait for us to start without him, so he could be the one to scare us. We arrived at the rundown bungalow on the edge of the woods around 11 p.m. We had locked all the doors and turned out all the flashlights by 11:30. The knocking began a few minutes later. At first we weren't sure if there actually was someone at the door or if it was just the wind blowing on a tree branch along the side of the house. The longer we waited, like normal, the louder it got. Whoever was out there was practically pounding on the door the entire time. And then I got this first text from Josh. Hey dude, I'm on Richie's porch. Where you all at? We're at the house. You left without me? I know you're there, knocking on the door. Shut the fuck up. You already started? Assholes! I just got off of work. God damn it, I'll be on my way. The texting annoyed my friend Richie, so he turned on the flashlight and shined it into my eyes. As soon as he did, the knocking on the door stopped. I showed him the text to everyone else, and they got a kick out of him. We all agreed that Josh at this point must have been fooling around with us. That's when the knocking started again, the moment we flipped off our flashlights. There was no crescendo this time. We could feel the person on the front porch pounding on the door, the air inside reverberating like a giant drum. It hurt my ears. I texted Josh to let him know that we aren't afraid. Your arm getting tired, man? Hey, don't come outside. You here? Question mark? I turned the flashlight on and pointed at the door, the knocking stopped immediately. But for a moment, the knob kept spinning, as if someone from the outside was twisting it. I texted Josh again. Just come in already. Stop playing. I'm going out to come find you, biatch. Yeah, I know. Teenagers be teenagers. After a few minutes, we turned the flashlights back off and, just like clockwork, the knocking resumed, except this time, it was at the back door. There was a little window at the top of the door, covered by decaying drapes. As the knocking continued, I quietly crept over and pulled them aside. That's when the sound died off, and the second I pressed my face against the glass, I looked through the window. Josh wasn't out there. No one was. There were now new noises coming from the basement. A screech in the cellar, as if the hatches were being thrown open, and then the stomp of boots traveling across the dirt floor below us. Richie ran to the kitchen and slammed shut the deadbolts on the door that, led downstairs. Richie was laughing while he did. I couldn't tell whether he was slap happy or terrified. One of the girls switched on their flashlights, and that's when Josh finally texted back. Hey, keep her lights on. Yeah, sure. Whatever. I showed the text to everyone. The girls thought it was funny, but Richie did not. He seemed amused. He had known Josh longer than any of us. Richie doubted Josh had the mental fortitude to successfully operate a microwave, much less pull off a prank of this scale. When we turned out the flashlights again, the knocking resumed, except this time, we heard it both at the front and back door. The pounding was now frenzied, so loud that we had to cover our ears. Hey, douchebag, can you please cut it out? I mean, I'm seriously gonna kick your ass, man. You're an evil mastermind, but even so, I will kick your ass. How many people do you get to help you? Just the two of us. Unlock the door. As soon as the knocking at the back door stopped, the door in the basement began to shake violently. The hinges were tiled, and the screws began to pop loose and spun across the kitchen floor. Amy turned on her flashlight again, and once again there was silence. I waited to unlock the door to let Josh in, but for some reason I felt nervous. This wasn't like him. Any moment I expected to hear him break down and start laughing. We all did, but there was nothing. My phone buzzed, Richie screamed, none of us made fun of him. I checked the screen. Okay, the game's over. You can let me in. Which door are you at? So I can let you in. I'm at the front door. Turn out the lights and let me in. We stood in silence until crying started. At first we wasn't sure if it was Josh, but eventually we heard him begging, pleading for us to come outside and help. He said he was sorry that he was late. He said that he tried to warn us. He said that he wanted us to shut off our light and open the door so he could come in. Instead, we sat on a circle on the floor in the living room with our backs all pressed together, our bloodshot eyes peering into the darkness. We took turns with the flashlights. Every time the beam begun to dim, the next person to our right would take over with their own flashlight. All the while, my phone kept buzzing. Every message was from Josh. Although I couldn't hear him outside anymore, I should have just turned the phone off because each text said the same thing. Let me in. 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 As soon as the sun came up, we unlocked the front door and ran. Josh wasn't there, and we weren't going to waste time looking for him. I got home just before my mom woke up. Josh also wasn't at school the next Monday either. That was nothing out of the ordinary. What was strange is the fact that he didn't answer his phone. When Richie and I went to his house to check in on him a few days later, no one answered the doorbell. His parents' cars were missing, and there were several newspapers piled up on the front porch. Amy said she saw him next month when her family was driving up to her grandparents for Easter. He was walking down the sidewalk alone, stumbling slowly, but also like he was drunk. Amy asked her father to stop and circle around, but Josh was gone by the time they returned. Soon after, one of our teachers told us that Josh had transferred into a therapeutic boarding school, and that his family had moved away to be closer to him. She said that Josh had been struggling for some time, but the faculty had kept it a secret out of respect. Eventually, Josh started responding to Richie's emails. He was cagey. He denied knowledge of anything that happened that night when we played the knocking game. He was polite but distant, and refused to give anything but the most punctuary details about his new life. Richie asked him if any of the rest of us could talk to him, but Josh declined. He added that he just got a new phone, so if we received any text from his old number, we should just ignore him. The rest of us graduated in the spring, and as far as I know, none of us had talked to Josh since then. I hear about him occasionally through mutual friends, people who claim to have seen him around but never end up talking to him. My friends and I got together to watch a movie during the first Thanksgiving break home from college. After the others fell asleep, the credits rolled, I received my message from Josh's old number. I I wonder what kind of sick puppy he had to be to dredge that all up again. I didn't bother telling my friends. It would have probably just scared them. But I took a few screenshots or two, and here's what it said. There's a wolf at the door. Just let me in.
I like to think I live a nice life. I own a cozy 3-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood in the suburbs. I have a wife I care about deeply, and a 9-year-old son who are my world. I enjoy my job as an accountant, and I'm well recognized in the community. I can confidently say I greatly enjoy living and appreciate all that I've earned. I only wish my entire life had been like this. You see, throughout my teens and early adulthood, I suffered from severe anxiety issues stemming from an experience in my youth, one that nearly ruined my life. I had done something that haunted me for nearly 15 years. It was only after 3 psychiatrists and many sleepless nights that I was able to forgive myself and learn to live again. Fortunately, my memories of these days are cloudy, and the scars have long healed. I will now try my best to recollect the events that unfolded that summer of 1978 as best I can. My memory is a bit faded, but I distinctly remember various things in my childhood. I remember playing Little League Baseball, drawing my favorite superheroes to tag on my wall, going on bike rides to the corner store to buy candy and baseball cards, and staying out late on summer nights to play Jailbreak with my neighborhood friends. In addition to all these things, I was also a first-year Boy Scout. I remember going to the elementary school auditorium every Wednesday after school, dressed in my uniform. In a troop of about 15 kids my age, I learned all kinds of things from fire safety to wildlife preservation. As a kid who grew up miles away from any forests, the lessons seemed incredibly abstract, yet entirely fascinating. I had never been camping before in my life, and the picture these lessons painted appealed to me greatly. Needless to say, after hearing about that year's 2-week long summer retreat, I was determined to attend. My parents were quite protective over me. They still are. And they were a bit concerned, because I had never left home longer than a day or two. But after days of persistent bugging, they reluctantly agreed to send me. That July I was shipped off to Roaring Run Boys Scout Camp located in Boswell, PA, only about 2 hours from my home. Coincidentally, it's still a summer camp, only under an entirely different name and affiliation. As we drove up the beaten gravel path, I remember looking in awe at the endless rows of trees and rustic cabins on either side of the road. We came out to a wide clearing with all the main buildings of the camp, and I noticed my troop leader in the distance among a handful of other troop leaders organizing their scouts. After my parents spoke briefly with my scoutmaster about various specifics of camp, my mother gave me a kiss on the cheek, and then they were off. I could hardly contain my excitement for the week. We were paired up with several troops from neighboring towns, because only a small amount of us showed up from each troop. We placed all our belongings in our cabin, Blue Ridge, one of the cabins I saw as I drove into camp. Afterwards, we returned back to the main field and slowly got to know each other's names by playing various games. I quickly got to know just about all of them, but one particular stood out to me. He was small, a lot smaller than the rest of us had been. He had frail limbs and messy blonde hair, and the buttons on his shirt were not evenly buttoned. He hadn't said a word since he got there, and I noticed a few of the scouts from his troop were pushing him around a bit, and picking on him during the games. Taking the game at hand very seriously, I soon disregarded this bullying and continued on. I did notice that by the time dinner rolled by, several scouts from the other troops started picking on him as well. That night, all the scouts on camp gathered to a bonfire located just past the main field in an outdoor auditorium of sorts. After reciting our honor code, the head counselor stepped forward and informed us about all the great activities ahead of us. There was swimming, canoeing, rifle bow shooting, scavenger hunts, hikes, competitions, and nights under the stars, all waiting for us, and I was ecstatic. After a speech on our core responsibilities as Boy Scouts to the environment and community, we were dismissed to our cabin for the night, around about a 10-minute walk from the main field. Our scoutmasters had forgotten something back at the main camp, so they left to go retrieve it. Alone, nearly all of the scouts began picking on Michael. It started rather innocent, but grew a lot worse once another scout found a stuffed animal tucked under the blankets of Michael's bunk. It was a sickly-looking creature, obviously enduring many years of abuse and quite frail. They started throwing the bear back and forth, and Michael had no choice but to stand and watch. The riot in the cabin began to spread, and it came to a point where the ringleaders of the bullying criticized the few of us who weren't picking on him. This is my first Boy Scout trip ever, I thought to myself. I wanted to be one of the cool kids. I asked myself, what if I'm the next they start bullying? At that ignorant age, I somehow thought my life would be over if those 2 weeks turned sour. My cowardice got the better of me, and I hit a turning point. The start of a series of events that would devastate me for years to follow. I went over to Michael's bunk and grabbed the bear from another scout holding it over Michael's head. With a strong pull, I ripped its head clean off, and the entire cabin boomed with roars as cotton rained from now decapitated bear. The look on Michael's face turned from frustrated to a depressing frown. That damn look on his face is still burned into my memory. For a brief moment, I felt a wave of extreme guilt. I had been raised better, and I knew my mum would be disappointed if she knew. However, I quickly forgot about it, as the entire cabin continued their outburst of laughter and praised me with comments. I was in. Just as the Scoutmasters returned, one of them shouted, "What on earth is going on here?" We all grew silent, expecting to pay the price for destroying the bear. Michael showed little emotion. He gathered the cotton he could from the floor and retreated to his bunk without saying a word. We expected him to tell on us, but all he did was pull the covers on top of him and lay silently. We thought we'd just lucked out. Gosh, I wish Michael had just spoken up and got us in trouble right there and then. My 15 minutes of fame had gotten to my head, and I longed to be praised more. It was odd. I didn't dislike Michael, yet I resorted to calling him names and pushing him around just for the shallow acceptance of my peers. As I write about it now, a great deal of guilt and shame is returning. If only I had known what my actions would lead to. A day passes. It is now the third day. I'm unsure if this is still customary for Boy Scouts, but back then, we all had a few pieces of equipment to look after. Particularly our mess tins, which were used for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. On the third afternoon of camp, just before lunch, I had a perfect joke in mind. I talked with the other kids in my cabin and convinced them to leave their mess tins on their bunks, so that we could force Michael to run back and retrieve them. Though pretty innocent compared to the other things Michael put up with that week, my cabin mates thought it was brilliant. This is where it all began. We all piled into the chow hall and found our seats. Michael was the last to walk in, and took a seat at the end of the table with his head down, mess tin in hand. I spoke up. "Hey Michael, we all kind of forgot our mess tins in the cabin. Think you could get them for us, pal?" A few of the guys chuckled. Michael didn't move. I spoke up. "Michael, it'd be a real shame if you didn't listen to us. Now go get our mess tins." Reluctantly, Michael got up and walked out the door. "I can't believe you got him to do that," one kid said. "What a puss," another kid said. "You're the man," the kid to my right said to me. We all got a pretty good hoot about it. 10 minutes pass. "What the heck is taking him so long? I'm hungry," I said. "He's probably fumbling all of our mess tins," one said. "That pansy better get his ass back here," another said. 30 minutes pass. No Michael. He probably just got lost, I thought to myself. An hour passes. We all figured he defied us to stay in the cabin. With empty stomachs, we were furious, and planned to deal hell when we found him. We arrived back at the cabin. No Michael. But our mess tins were missing from our beds. The Scoutmasters had noticed Michael's absence, and had us come with them to see if he was somewhere back at the main camp. They left us in the main field while they searched. 30 more minutes passed. It hadn't hit any of us that anything bad could have happened. He probably had to take a shit, one kid said. We all laughed, mainly at the profanity. Our Scoutmasters seemed to have been gone forever, so we started to play games in the woods. We had just finished our third game of tag when we heard something coming down the road. 2 police cruisers came into light and drove past us toward the main building. I think we all had an idea there was something wrong, but looked for other explanations. You, think this is about Michael? One said. No way. It's probably just a bear or something, another said. Logical enough for us at 10 years old. It was about 6 hours past lunch and we had nothing to do but lay in the grassy clearing. Just as before, we heard a sound coming down the road, only much louder. An influx of cars began coming up the mountains. Our parents? Yes, but their cars are also accompanied by police cars mixed in between them. More than I had ever seen at one time. I recognized Johnstown Police Department on the sides of a few of them. Odd. They were from a small city at least 30 minutes away. One by one, we were intercepted by our parents and taken back to the beaten gravel road. I was one of the last. But just as the others, I saw my parents come up the road. Once my father saw me, he stopped the car, and they both got out. Come on, sweetie, camp is over, my mother said. I responded, but it's only been 3 days. Why? She paused, almost as if she were thinking of what to say. A little boy went missing, so the police are going to help find him. They just want to look for him without the other campers getting in the way. I'm sure he just wandered into the forest. It made sense, I thought. What was most peculiar is at that moment, I hadn't even made the connection to Michael. It must have been some other kid, I thought. No way I had anything to do with this. I was pretty devastated that my week at camp ended so abruptly, but I got in the car and went home nonetheless. 2 weeks had passed. And I finally made the connection that Michael may have been the one who went missing. Funny how a young kid can so easily ignore the most logical explanation. I noticed my parents had been acting a bit differently. They wouldn't allow me to attend the summer Boy Scout meetings anymore, and I was almost positive I heard my mother say she would never let her son leave the house again, over the phone. Had I done something wrong? Little by little, I began to make ends meet, and thoughts of Michael came into my head. I grew the intense curiosity only kids are capable of having, and approached my father several times. Anytime I asked about the missing boy, he would look away and respond to my question with, I'm not sure, I haven't been checking the newspaper much lately. I knew he was lying. Every day before work, my father was accustomed to lounging on the couch to catch up on sports and local news. It was clear there was something he was hiding from me. I knew he had a habit of leaving old newspapers on his nightstand, so I went to investigate while he was at work. Just as I had hoped, newspapers stretching back 3 weeks lay before me. Starting from the oldest, I looked through them in hopes of finding my answer. Aha! I found one! Dated the day after camp was cancelled. I noticed the headline. Search begins for Jennistown Area Boy Scout. Michael's picture covered the front page. That must have been it. I skipped a week ahead and found another. Search party for missing Boy Scout called off. Within the article, it described the mysterious disappearance of Michael, who was last seen in the chow hall with his fellow scouts. I skipped several more days. My stomach turned sour. Bodily remains of child found at local Boy Scout camp. The headline makes me sick, but I continued reading. Below is what I remember of the article. Once the search party was called off, Roaring Run was reopened, and campers returned. It was very hot and humid that week, and those who stayed in the Blue Ridge complained of a foul stench in the cabin the first few days. As the second week came by, the stench grew unbearable, and camp maintenance went to the cabin looking to find the source. The first thing they noticed was an abnormally loose floorboard near the center of the cabin. When they uncovered the board, they made a shocking discovery. Underneath was the mangled, decomposing body of a young boy, partially buried by several mess tins. Our mess tins. The crevice he was jammed in was filled with blood, and his face was bludgeoned almost beyond recognition. The only piece of evidence they found was a bloody, decapitated teddy bear in his hands with a note inside reading, Spiker. There were no witnesses or suspects. I hadn't fully realized what the course of my actions accomplished, but as I grew older, the guilt grew stronger. and I once nearly resorted to suicide. My actions killed an innocent human being. If I hadn't have sent Michael back to get our damn mess tins, he would probably still be here. Fortunately, after many years, I am finally able to forgive myself of my actions so long ago. Roaring Run was closed permanently, and the land was purchased by a logging company who used it for about 10 years. The land lay untouched until 1998, when it was purchased by a Marine Corps general who turned it into a youth mentor camp. Every once in a while, when I visit my parents, I take a trip to the local library and view the same archived headlines I discovered all those years ago. It's weird. What once caused me such pain and guilt for the greater part of my life has left me desensitized. Though sometimes I can still see his desperate face that night I ruined his bear. If only I had known what was in store for the summer of 1978. Still, what does Spiker mean?
Tomino's Hell. This is a popular Japanese story. It is about a poem called Tomino's Hell. They say that you should only read it with your mind, never out loud. If you were to read it out loud, then you must take the responsibility for your own actions. Tomino's Hell, written by Yamata Inuhiko in a book called The Heart's Like a Rolling Stone, and was included in Seizo Jazo's 27th collection in poems in 1919. It's not sure how this rumor started, but there's only one warning that if you read this poem out loud, tragic things will happen. It just looks like a curse. It asks to not compare this with the common "you'll grow taller" or even "my parents died." Do you get a sense of how dangerous this is yet? This story used to be very popular in 2CH, and there are many people taking pictures and videos of proof of them posting this on 2CH. There were many users that said that nothing happened, but there were just as many posts that didn't have that user come back as a result of the post results. I think it's a lot scarier than someone posting someone else got sick or someone else passed away. But if you were to read it out loud, it's better to read it in Japanese rather than the translation. The following is a narration translated from the original Japanese. Tomino's Hell by Sajo Yazo. His older sister vomited blood, his younger sister vomited fire, and the cute Tomino vomited glass beads. Tomino fell into hell alone, hell wrapped in darkness, and even flowers don't bloom. Is the person with the whip Tomino's older sister? I wonder whose blood is on it. Hit without hitting. Infinite hells is one road. Would you lead him to the dark hell? To the sheep of gold, to the brush of warbler? Fit as much as you can into a leather sack for the preparation of the journey in the familiar hell. Spring is coming even in the forest and the stream, even in the 7 valley streams of the dark hell. The bush warbler in the bird cage, the sheep in the wagon, tears in the eyes of cute Tomino. Cry brush warbler towards the raining forest. He shouts that he misses his little sister. The crying echo reverberates throughout hell. The fox pennoy blooms, circling around hell's 7 mountains and 7 streams. The lonely journey of cute Tomino. If they are in hell, bring them to me. The needle of the graves I won't pierce with the red needle. In the milestones of little Tomino. Oh, It looks like you made it to the end card. Well, if you like to go over here, we got Creepypastas. Over here, Let's Not Meet. Down here, a randomly generated top list for your viewing consumption. If you happen to like this video, leave a like. If you happen to love this video, leave a subscribe. Every subscribe counts. And thanks to all the Patreon donators of this month. With that being said, I'm your host, That Creepy Reading, and I'm signing off.